Howdy. We're back. Yeah, this is the podcast. You've made it. Or should I say I've made it. I made it here to the podcast to give it to you, and then you can enjoy it. So anyway, welcome to the podcast. The Colonel and the Kid podcast is up and running today, Friday, March 6th, 2026. So we're here with the podcast. I'm your host, Gregory L. Heitmann. Greg, for the most part. You can call me Greg. But little background here. Yeah. This podcast is it's for my grandfather, dedicated to him. My grandfather was Lieutenant Colonel Edwin P. Hagen Jr., and a lot of people called him the Colonel. I called him Grandpa. Some people called him Old Timer, but he had some nicknames. And I put together this podcast based on my memoir, The Colonel and the Kid. I guess the main reason I did it was just to have a record of my grandfather and the man I looked up to and learned a lot from, and figured now I could probably try to share some of that information with you, the listener, and maybe you can learn things the easy way instead of the hard way. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if people can learn things the easy way. I think it's always the hard way when you actually learn a lesson. It's like, oh, okay, that's what happens if X happens, then Y is the result. Not Y, W-H-Y. X, like this is like an algebra equation. X equals Y. I don't know. That doesn't help either. So forget that. Let's just move on. But anyway, that was the main reason I put the podcast together, was just to really have a record of my grandfather and some of the lessons he taught me, some of the history that was there. But the other secondary reason that I came to realize why I was even doing this was it was like psychotherapy, just written therapy. You write stuff down and then you kind of reflect on them, and really it's kind of a record, I guess, of how I became who I am. I think that's what really the peripheral fallout, if you will, of this whole project that I'm working on and continuing to work on is really a record of my grandfather, but then how I became who I am. I think that kind of dawned on me later in the production of this whole thing. But it makes sense. It makes sense that that's how you just keep building stuff on top of your memories, and it makes you who you are. So anyway, that's what, if you're listening to this or watching this, now you know why I am the way I am, how I became to be this way, good or bad, if that's true. It'd be interesting to see if a real life psychiatrist or psychologist or somebody that's in the psychology field would analyze the podcast itself and then just maybe the memoir, put them together and see what diagnosis they would come up with for me. Maybe I'm a complete narcissist. I don't think so. I would have a hard time believing that scenario, but it could be. I don't know. Someday, maybe somebody will write their dissertation on just this podcast, and they'll have a whole publish a book about it, and the memoir included with the podcast, and get like a full picture of me, of who I am, and it can be a case study. And hopefully it's just a case study of a great person, a great leader, and inspirational figure in history, and not a psychopath. That's what we hope. Anyway, that's a long introduction of this episode of the podcast. And I'm sitting here calling it this is episode 32 or chapter 32. And I've used those terms interchangeably, but they're not really, because the episodes of the podcast are just um, the numbered episodes, and I've mixed them up because I've had episodes that didn't include chapters of the memoir, and so they've kind of been everything's kind of jumbled a little bit as far as the numbering system. You might not be able to follow the actual podcast chapters by the episode, but I'm trying to do my best to try to keep that consistency. And after I realized it was getting kind of out of hand, so now what I've done here is we're calling this season 2, episode 12 of the Colonel and the Kid podcast. That's today, and this is the Long Lake Deer Hunt, because the first season of the podcast was based on the memoir chapters 1 through 20. So that's volume 1 of the memoir. And now we're in volume 2 of the memoir, which is chapters 21 through 40. And now we're on chapter 32. So we're more than halfway through the second volume. And now this is season 2, episode 12. And I don't know if that helps or makes things more confusing. You don't even really need to know that, as long as you're just listening and paying attention to. You don't even have to pay attention to what number it is or what the title is. You can just listen to the chapter and good feel of it and how it how it made me the way I am. So that's what we got going on. And I will get right to that chapter. I you know, I have hopes of going and touching on some other subjects after the chapter today, but this is a longer chapter. It's got quite a few photos, and it's a really good chapter, I think, talking about Long Lake again. This is the Long Lake deer hunt as opposed to the Long Lake duck hunt. And that, the Long Lake duck hunt was the one duck hunt I remember going with Grandpa Hagen up there. And so this chapter is the Long Lake deer hunt, and it was the one time I remember going deer hunting with Grandpa Hagen up at Long Lake on my the Heitmann farm. My Grandpa Heitmann's farm place up there, and really how it built a lot more into my life, a large segment of my life, and formation of who I think I am, I guess, along the deer hunting lines goes. So this is a good chapter, I think, kind of dig into how Grandpa, I guess, formed my mentality, and just being part of the tribe, the hunting tribe, the hunting family. So, but after that, if there's time, I may go into some ongoing stories, some updates just of what's going on in the world, and just some stuff that I've observed and want to comment on. So hopefully we can make it through, and then we can get on to a few other wild and crazy stories going on out there. So anyway, let's get to the chapter. I'm going to call that up. Get on it. All right, we're ready to go. And again, this is the Colonel and the Kid, chapter 32, the Long Lake Deer Hunt. And of course, we start with a quote. Quote, "The only reason I ever played golf in the first place was so I could afford to hunt and fish." End quote. And that is a quote by Sam Snead. And he was a professional golfer, probably from the 1940s and 50s, maybe. Really good golfer. I remember seeing some of the golf equipment when I was a kid. My early days as a child, up until my teenage years, I guess. I think Sam Snead was still selling golf clubs, golf balls, stuff like that. You might see some stuff with his name on it. Not anymore. I don't think he's really well known anymore, but at the time, I think in his prime, he was a pretty flashy golfer. But the only reason he played golf was to win money so he could hunt and fish. It's a pretty good motivation, if you ask me. So anyway, let's get this chapter started. Long Lake and the Heitmann farm have a long history for me with duck hunting, but I have distinct memories of big deer spotted during the early October waterfall excursions. It might have been my first year carrying a gun. Glued to my dad's side, hunting ducks with my hand-me-down single-shot 20-gauge Harrington Richardson shotgun. Just a few hundred yards from the car on an early morning, the sky was brightening pre-sunrise. Dad and I scared up one of the biggest bucks in my memory. This was probably the first, quote, wall hanger buck that I can recall seen in the wild. That deer ran up the hill like nothing, gliding away towards the trees that surrounded the area where the house that my dad grew up in used to stand. The ducks that day took a back seat to those rippling muscles of that buck escaping two intruders into his territory. And we got the first photo of this chapter, and this is you might look at this photo and wonder why, it fits in here, but I'll read the caption then to try to describe. Caption reads, "This is a photo taken right before Garrett left for his Air Force officer training school in 1998, as he made a tour to see grandparents and say goodbye. Behind him is the old Harry Heitmann farmstead. The trees in the distance were the shelter belt protecting the area where the house once stood." So I'll describe the photo a little bit. This is on South Dakota Highway 25, and it's looking to the northeast and from the road and the approach to where the old farmstead would go up. And Garrett's kind of on the right side of the picture. He's standing there in a shorts and t-shirt. This is kind of the summer. It's cloudy. Looks like it might have been raining or rainy that day. And it's looking from, like I said, South Dakota Highway 25 towards the northeast. There's a stop sign on the approach. In the back, looks like there's like a, I don't know, 10, 15 rows of corn, and then some other, maybe wheat planted there. And then further back, you can see the trees, a little L-shaped shelter belt. And there used to be a house and a barn, a chicken coop, a windmill in that area. And it's all gone in this picture in 1998, and all that house and everything, all the outbuildings and everything just disappeared. And that was where my grandpa Heitmann had his farm place and where my dad grew up, at least through his teenage years. I think they moved to Britain, South Dakota, probably when my dad was in high school. So he's probably 14, 15 years old. So he grew up, spent his first 14, 15 years there on that farm place. And one of the problems with the photo that I should have had a little wider view. We had limited photography equipment back then, but should have had a panoramic view. And to the right side of the photo, on Garrett's left, a little further, if the photo was more panoramic, you could have seen where the lake actually is. Long Lake is just off to Garrett's left there in the photo, but it's a really good photo, nice and crisp. Pretty sure I took that. I don't know if I took that with an automatic camera that I got for high school graduation. I think this was probably taken with the manual camera that my dad had and I had co-opted in 1998 because I think I was taking pictures of hunting and everything back then. So it's a pretty good photo. It's very crisp and clear. Good color in it still. So anyway, back to the chapter. One of the coolest things about Long Lake are the oak trees that encompass some of the areas along the shoreline. My favorite duck hunting spot, the point, juts out into the lake. Most of the point is covered by mature oak trees, an area about 6 or 7 acres, making up a miniature forest. It was fascinating to walk through those trees on the windiest of days while heading to the lake to duck hunt. Those trees shielded you from the wind to a degree that would make you think that there wasn't a breath of air. There were often times that a walk through those trees would kick out a whitetail. I look forward to the day I can replicate that walk through the trees. And here we have the second photo. And I'll read the caption, then try to maybe describe and comment on it a little bit. The caption reads, "The oak forest going out to the point. I didn't have a photo, but I did have this painting I created that was inspired by the memories. According to my signature and date, this was painted in 1992. So this is a framed oil painting I did in 92. I think I was probably still in college. I might have been taking a painting class to get, complete my art minor at South Dakota State University. This is a picture of us, nice little buck in the trees, and it's kind of foggy fall scene. There's a few leaves on the tree still, and some little bushes, and there's some red leaves on the bushes. I tried to paint it, I guess, with some of the fog and the overcast sky in the background, and it's a buck. He stopped looking back towards the observer, and it's pretty interesting. It's got a frame on it. I think I'd put that frame on it late in life. It just had I think it had like black electrical type tape just around the edge of the white canvas. And then this is I think they call it a floating frame. And you can see that, I think you can see some of the black electrical tape around the edge of the canvas. So that would just somehow, it's like locked into the frame, but you can still see the edges of the canvas frame. It's a small print. I think the actual size is probably 18 by 12, maybe somewhere in there, 18 by 16, possibly. And I think my mom's cousin Eloise has this picture now. I told her that she should hand it off to somebody when we moved her out of the Groton house a couple years ago now. And I like the photo. I look over the painting, and I like this photo of the painting, and I have that now for posterity. But hopefully somebody else can enjoy the painting and pass it down through history. Anyway, back to the chapter. The only time I deer hunted with Grandpa was up at Long Lake. There were always plenty of deer tags from Marshall County, and that year in the late 1980s was filled with anticipation for me. An earlier fall duck hunt, I had spooked a nice buck out of the oak trees, walking to the point. Maybe this was the year I could be like Grandpa and get a big buck. That opening morning in November for deer was an overcast day. One of those South Dakota days where it was cold and damp, foretelling snow on the way. Noticeably calm, the proverbial calm before the storm. It was actually a pretty decent day to deer hunt. I tell people here in New Mexico that if it's not windy in South Dakota, you notice it. This was one of those days. We met Grandpa at the old farm place and formulated a plan. It wasn't much of a question on what the strategy would be. Grady and I would walk through the trees that covered the point. Grandpa would stay back and be on the alert for anything that we might chase out. The deer didn't have but one escape route, coming back to where Grandpa would be waiting. I never saw any deer while walking through the trees. I think back, and I was naive in the ways of deer hunting. I think I strolled through the trees as if I were on my typical trip to the point for a duck hunt. It should have been a still hunt through the trees. Take a few steps, stop, lean against an oak tree, and look around, then repeat. Regrouping with Grandpa, he was there at the truck. Did you see anything? I asked. He wasn't shaking his head no, that he hadn't seen anything. He was shaking his head at his luck, because he had seen a big one. Nice buck came out, but I couldn't get a shot. Grandpa pointed to the trees. I had to wait because I didn't know where you guys were, and by the time he was clear of your direction, he dropped down behind the hill. Then he was gone. Really? I questioned in disbelief. Where'd he go? Just over the hill, I guess. Grandpa gestured to the north, still shaking his head. We'll have to check out a couple more of those sloughs over there, see if we can find him. I stared to the north, anticipation building again, with the news of a nice buck. When Grady arrived, conversation was repeated between Grandpa and Grady. That was the highlight of the hunt. No deer were harvested that season, but it firmly planted the deer hunting seed for me. I got my first deer in Marshall County, a small forkhorn, a couple years later. Marshall County deer hunting did produce several bucks for Grady, including a wall hanger in 1991. And I have a photo of that big buck from Marshall County that Grady got. And I'll read the caption here and then describe. Caption reads, photo of Grady's Marshall County buck from 1991. So this picture is taken just a couple years ago at his house on his ranch in Falk County. And it's a nice wide 5x6. It's got 6 points on one side and 5 on the other, small brow tines, but it's so symmetrical and it's just a beautiful rack to look at. It's got Nice, nice heavy beams, not super heavy beams, but nice, um, heavy antlers all the way out, long, tall tines, curving in. It's just got this beauty to it with the symmetry and everything. And I remember that I was still in college. Grady had graduated in 89 or 90. And I was still in college at South Dakota State University. And I remember he was hunting up at Marshall County by himself and he got that deer. And I think we were going down to Sioux Falls for Thanksgiving. And I remember seeing the pictures of it at Thanksgiving when I went to Sioux Falls. I don't know if somebody picked me up and took me from college down there in Brookings down there, but I remember seeing pictures. And Grady, he hadn't skinned it out hadn't caped it for a shoulder mount or anything like that. And he asked me if he should have it mounted. And I said, yeah. And I think Grandpa saw pictures of, yeah, he should have that thing mounted. And he did get it mounted. And that was in 1991. Here we are 30, 35 years later. It's got there's plenty of pictures of it when he got it. Here's a picture of it hanging on the wall at his house, still looking good. Very, very good mount. Good taxidermy job with that deer too. It's just a beautiful deer. But it doesn't have the original cape. It's got a cape that the taxidermist had to provide because Grady had cut the head off the deer and it didn't have a good cape for it. So nice, beautiful white-tailed deer from Marshall County, South Dakota. Then we have another picture, and I'll read the caption, then describe. And it's, caption reads, Greg and his first buck taken to Marshall County, South Dakota, November 1989. And I was still in college, home for the weekend. And this is the picture's taken in the front yard of my parents' house. And it's a small little fork-horn deer. And I got my camouflage coveralls on. It looks like I have a Dallas Cowboys stocking cap for some reason. I don't know where I got that, just to put it on to take a picture in the front yard because we didn't have the camera. Didn't take a camera with us at that point. Wasn't too serious about hunting, I guess, yet at the time. But that was my first deer. I'm really smiling. I'm kneeling down, holding up the deer, and you could just see I got my hand around its right antler, and the deer's on the right side, and I'm kneeling there, and you can only see one of the horns, one of the antlers there, little 2-point buck, little fork. And I'm holding the rifle I got it with, and it's Grandpa's Model 7400 Remington 6mm. And got my plaid. You can see my plaid shirt, my standard hunting uniform on underneath my camouflage coveralls, and there's snow on the ground in the front yard. So that'd been like towards the end of November in 1989. So there was, a few inches of snow on the ground, and you can barely see the house in the background. But I got a big smile on my face. Very happy with that. It's my first deer I ever got. But back to the chapter. 30 years later, I am awestruck looking back on my humble beginnings of deer hunting. Life in general was a little unsettled for a few years with college, Army basic training, and my first real job during the late 1980s and early 1990s. I didn't get fully engulfed by buck fever until 1994. Grady had settled into Falk County with his family, job, and ranch life in 1992. Riding on the coattails of Grady's Falk County connections, hunting really took off for me. In 1993, pheasant hunting exploded for me in western Falk County thanks to the Conservation Reserve Program, the CRP, the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks Walk-In Area Program, and Grady's Landowner Network. Pair the habitat with Grady's first black lab, Brandy, and the pheasant hunting was amazing. That fall of 1993, while hunting pheasants in the tall grass of western Falk County, we chased up so many big bucks, it was ridiculous. I told Grady that I was going to put in for Falk County deer tag the next year, and I did. The year 1994 brought even more stability for my life. I got a job in the federal government, moved back to Groton and settled in. I did draw a deer tag for Falk County, and November quickly rolled around with Grady as my guide. We got to our hunting spot on a frosty opening November morning. Walking about a half mile from the truck on that chilly morning hunt, it was over quickly. We glassed a big buck about a mile back to the east and had a plan to head in his direction. But first, I just wanted to peek over the next rise in the rolling prairie. It seemed like deer were everywhere that morning. It must have been peak of the rut, as love-struck bucks seemingly were wandering around everywhere. I'm pretty sure it was November 19th. That is Garrett's birthday, and many a deer has been harvested on that day by our family since. When I got over the rise, just along the fence line, there was a big buck standing stock still, staring at me. Grady had stayed back, keeping an eye on that big buck we had spotted earlier, so he couldn't see the events that unfolded. He was definitely surprised when he heard me shoot. I got the gun up to my shoulder and apparently had a bit of buck fever. The buck stood at about 60 yards, probably wondering what the heck I was out here in the middle of this sea of grass. I fired Grandpa's borrowed Remington 7400 autoloader, chambered in 6mm. The deer just stood there, a clean miss. I aimed for his rut-swollen neck, shot again, and he dropped like a rock. The vision of that deer writhing after being hit in the neck stuck with me. It's not a good place to aim for. I had to shoot him again. I highly recommend the most humane dispatching of game, and that method is to aim for the heart lung area. It is quickly over when you hit them there. I couldn't believe it. I had gotten my first big buck. He had heavy-duty antlers. This buck wasn't a monster, but he was big and special. The antlers fell into a non-typical category, 4 points on one side and 7 on the other. And here I have a photo of that buck. And I'll read the caption, then describe. The caption reads, "Photo of my 1994 Falk County buck, my first big deer." So this is it's a picture of me, and I'm sitting on the right side of the photo, and we got the deer loaded up in Grady's truck, back of his pickup, and he's got the old. This was a diesel pickup, Chevy diesel pickup. I don't know what year the truck was. It is a newer truck, but it was black and mostly gray on the sides, but had like a black top on the cab and an extended cab pickup. And you can see that big buck that's in there, in the back there. That it's loaded with its back end towards the cab, and its head and antlers are sticking out onto the tailgate. And I got my right hand leaning out. I'm leaning on the antlers, and that's the side of the antlers that have 7 points on that side, and the other side is it's just got 4 on the other side. It's a great big buck because you can see that there's a doe antlerless deer that's loaded in there as well, and that deer looks tiny. It was probably I don't think it was a fawn. I think it was a small doe, medium-sized doe, because I had 2 tags. I had any deer and any antlerless deer for Falk County that year. And you can see in the background, you can kind of see the territory what we're talking about. It's just this treeless prairie. There's nothing around, just grass, fence line. In the back, maybe a ways back there, you can see a stack of bales, but otherwise it's just grass, just pasture land. It's amazing. And hayland, I guess, for baling up and feeding to the cattle in the wintertime. But there's snow on the ground. And I think it was probably pretty chilly. It was probably I bet it was in the teens that morning, and pretty frosty. I'm dressed in some old camouflage army pants and a camouflage sweatshirt with orange vest, and I got a Viking stocking cap on. Looking good there, standing in some snow. Got my black Matterhorn boots on, my military Matterhorn boots. Those are some good boots. I highly recommend them. Unfortunately, I don't think they make them anymore. So I recommend them, but the recommendations in vain because I don't think those boots exist. But you can see the fence along there. There's a little trail we drove in on, and this is I'm not sure if this, I think this was, I don't know if this was walk-in area or not, or if Grady had permission just to hunt here. I think later this guy that owned this land, he actually ran bison on it. I remember hunting that later, and there was bison out there. At this time, I don't think there was any. I don't know if they were grazing at all, if it was just all hayland at that time, or what could be harvested, because I think it was a lot of it was in the conservation reserve program and just grass for, the government would pay the farmer to just keep some of this highly erodible land in, I guess, just not for agricultural use, just in grass. Keep it from eroding. But anyway, it's real nice. It's a good picture. Grady took this picture with my dad's old camera there. Did a good job. Highly commended for his photography skills of taking pictures of me. Anyway, back to the chapter. What is most striking about the antlers, to me anyway, is the mass and the trident-shaped tines on the left antler. The main beam on the left side is broken, and excluding the brow tine, the three tines on that side look like Neptune's trident. It's cool. Although the coolest part was sharing the photos and the story with Grandpa. It was less than 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and we were going to see Grandpa and Grandma in Siston. Back in those days, we still used cameras with film. I had co-opted my dad's 35mm camera, and inspired by the old slides from Grandpa's hunts to Beaver Slough, I started taking photos. Some might say an excessive number of photos. Up in Siston, Grandpa couldn't have been more excited for me. He offered to mount the antlers on a plaque. Of course I said yes. I first imagined I was going to have a shoulder mount of the deer. But still green at deer hunting in general, I hung the deer in Grady's shed with a rope around its neck. This damaged the cape and helped convince me that the antlers were destined for a plaque instead. It all worked out. It might be my favorite set of antlers that I actually display. And here's a couple photos. And read the caption, then describe. Caption reads, photo of my 1994 deer antlers on a plaque mounted by Grandpa, with a detailed photo of the engraved brass plate. So this is just a photo of the antlers mounted onto a plaque. I think that it was like a kit that you could buy from Cabela's at the time, and a little, I think it's just like a compressed piece of wood with a veneer on it and painted around the edge. And it came with a little brass metal plate that you could take to like a trophy shop, like a bowling trophy or golf trophy shop, and have it engraved. And so my grandpa mounted those antlers on a plaque. And the photo on the left, there's two photos here. The photo on the left is just the antlers. They're down from the wall, just sitting on the carpet. And really, I took this photo trying to highlight what I call the Neptune trident shaped antlers on the left side of the deer. And then on the right side photo, it's like a detailed photo of the little plaque that Grandpa had engraved and stuck onto the plaque. And it says, Greg Heitmann, 19 November 1994, Falk County, 6mm Remington Auto. So it's an awesome keepsake memory that I have these antlers hanging in my bedroom here in my house in Santa Fe, New Mexico still. And get a look at them every day. Go to bed, see them up there on the wall. It's pretty awesome. Awesome to remember Grandpa and getting those mounted for me on the plaque like that. Glad he did it. So back to the chapter. I laugh when I think about getting back to Grady's ranch and him telling me later, when we were working on skinning the buck, he said, I had to go check my deer on my wall as compared with yours. Grady said, mine's still nicer. He was right, but I always thought that if he had to go check for comparison, that my buck must be pretty good. Grady's last deer hunt in Marshall County was 1994. He was convinced by that time that Falk County was the future for deer. And a lot more convenient, literally just out his front door. It was an amazing environment for big bucks. There's so many other deer hunting stories that we've compiled since 1994 that I am planning, at least contemplating, another book to document those nearly 30 years of deer hunting in Falk County. However, I couldn't resist including a deer hunting story in one of those years that included the bomber. The years sort of blend together, but this was the year of the millennial bucks. It was the year 2000. It was my last year hunting as a resident of South Dakota. This was the year I took a job with Federal Highway Administration in Ames, Iowa. I had enough time off to deer hunt for a few days with Grady in Falk County. It was a November day with a little more snow on the ground than average for the East River deer season. It was cold. I know this was a long time ago because Grady had permission to hunt the neighbor's property. This was before the two sons took over the farm and proceeded to run the operation into bankruptcy in less than 10 years. I was sitting in the truck staying warm while Grady hunted the neighbor's creek. We were about a mile from the house as the crow flies. I had never even heard the shot. Grady appeared seemingly out of nowhere, walking back to the truck. He got behind the wheel. Got one. I looked at him in disbelief. I'll drive up closer. He fell in the creek. Not sure if the ice is frozen solid enough. It should be, though. But if I fall in, we'll have the truck close by. We got the deer off the ice, gutted, tagged, and loaded up on the tailgate of the truck. Out of the neighbor's gate and onto the gravel county road, we drove a mile south, then turned back east, down the township road, and finally back to the house to show Bobby, my sister-in-law, Grady's wife, our success for the morning. Out of the truck and into the house to grab a quick snack, warm up for a minute, and let Bobby get her coat on. We returned outside to get some photos. The shock and puzzlement hit hard. Where was the deer? It seemed like a rural episode of Candid Camera. There had to have been some hidden cameras filming our reaction of that missing deer. It took only a moment to dawn on us what had happened. The deer was loaded up only on the tailgate. They must have slid out of the bed of the truck. Grady and I quickly hopped into the bomber, hustled back down the road, back to the approach for the neighbor's pasture. We'd have to get back into the pasture. You could see something lying in the middle of the county road, a quarter mile away. It was a buck lying right in the middle of the road, perfectly perpendicular to traffic. Luckily, there isn't a whole lot of traffic on a mid-morning weekday. I guess that warm deer, enough snow on its fur from being dragged back to the truck, provided the perfect amount of slick tailgate to slide out of the truck. It just seemed beyond ridiculous that had happened. What a cunning buck. A deer that was able to give us a slip even after being loaded into the truck, not to mention being dead. We got the deer loaded up again, shut the tailgate this time, and delivered him home. So many nice deer harvested over the years, but that slippery buck might be the most preposterous story to go with a buck we ever harvested. And here we have a couple photos. The first photo, I'll read the caption and then describe. Caption reads, Grady with a slippery buck. Prior to the events that earned the deer's nickname, November 2000. Note the bomber doing its work as a hunting truck. It may not look it, but it was a cold day. So it's a picture of Grady and he's sitting on the tailgate and the deer is loaded up with its rear end up closer to the cab and its head sitting on the tailgate, sitting over the edge of the tailgate. And he's got the head up. He's got the left antler of the deer. He's holding his left hand on that, holding the head up straight. And he's got some camouflaged pants on, camouflage jacket, and some yellow farm gloves, work gloves, stocking cap, and an orange vest it's like an orange transportation worker vest because I think I had gotten it from my job at the time. But you can see it's got the retro reflective stripes on it. It's funny. I don't know if it's really, I think it meets the qualification for blaze orange, but it really stands out in this photo. But the bomber, he's sitting in the bomber's tailgate there, and it's funny. There's a lot of stuff going on in the photo, but it's the classic photo. I think it was a nice 4x4. I don't think Grady would ever even give this deer a second look nowadays, but it was a nice deer at the time. We thought anyway. Now he's gotten so many big deer that he won't even glance at something that size now, more than just says, "Yeah, that one might be a good one next year." But as you can see, the old days, November 2000, it's got the cell phone antenna, magnetic antenna on top of the bomber truck there, and it's going in through the little back sliding window of the truck. And it's the classic historical timestamp of the photo there with that magnetic cell phone antenna. And this is in the neighbor's pasture looking west. You can see the tree. There's a shelter belt there on the left side of the photo, and it's a good amount of snow. It's probably about 6 inches of snow probably all over that pasture. And you can see there's some utility poles in the distance just off Grady's elbow there in the background, and that's the county road there where the deer fell off and was laying in the middle of the road for a little while before we came back to retrieve it. Just makes it's so funny. It makes me just laugh to think about that. And then here's another photo below that with Bobby checking out the deer. It's just the head of the deer because we had hung it up and skinned it and cut the head off before because she didn't want to come out and look at it because she didn't believe it still. Anyway, I'll read the caption and then describe a little more. I eventually got a photo of Bobby with the slippery buck. She was reluctant to get her coat and boots on for a photo after the previous debacle of a photo shoot attempt where the buck was missing. This photo from November 2000 was with her and just the head of the deer. Later, after we had gotten buck hung up and skinned, I think Bobby thought we were messing with her the first time we asked her to come out and take a look at the buck. So she was hesitant to come out, didn't want to be fooled again. And classic photo because you can see, you got to look closely, but you can see two Labrador retrievers in this photo. There's obviously a black lab over there, the just off of Bobby's right hand. That's Brandy looking at the deer, and then right by the nose of the deer, you can see my chocolate lab, Mickey, looking at the head of that deer. Classic photo in the back of the bomber, and she's just she's got her left hand holding the right antler of the deer, looking at the camera, smiling, and you can see that the bed of the bomber there backed into the driveway. Classic photo. So, all right, let's finish out the chapter. There are so many deer hunting stories now, but for me, I can tie them all back to one nexus. Grandpa, the original deer hunter in the family. What started out as the cherished story of the long leg deer hunt ended up rambling into several tales in an extra long chapter. I'm glad you have indulged me to this point. I am honored that you have read this far about my grandfather and me. It just feels like my story is representative of many others out there. Maybe you can relate, or you know somebody that has shared a similar journey. Nonetheless, if you can get a smile and a laugh from my words, I have achieved my goal as a writer. So that's it. And as always, we close out the chapter with a quote. And this is a good one. I think I punctuated this at the end of the chapter with a very appropriate quote. And I'll read it here. Quote, "The old man used to say the best part of hunting and fishing was the thinking about going and the talking about it after you got back." End quote. And that's a quote from Robert Ruark, who was a writer, and it's from his book, The Old Man and the Boy. And I just can't think of any more appropriate quote at this point. It's like the Colonel and the Kid, except it's the old man and the boy. Another writer, another outdoorsman, deer hunter, Robert Ruark. I think he wrote I think he was more famous for safaris in hunting in Africa. But don't quote me on that. You can look him up and find out more about him. But I'm pretty sure he was like a well-known hunter and writer about his, you know, stories that he chronicled about hunting the safaris and being in Africa doing the big game hunting safari. So anyway, that's it. That's chapter 32, the long leg deer hunt. So that's a good one. 45 minutes. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed reading about it. This brings back so many memories and so many things that just thoughts pop into my head as I'm reading that and things I'd like to talk about. The wish that I would have written more details about each year of deer hunting, have a little journal about that. Just um, a mistake, a failure on my part to really have a good accounting of all those hunts and everything else. And I'll try to go back, and I think that's one of it's on the checklist of things to do in the future of recording these other hunts that Grady and I had, Falk County and otherwise West River, and they just won't be as good because of my. I'm sure my memory just does not recall the things that it should. That you know, so oh well, we'll do our best. Maybe to have the record. We definitely got the antlers and the plaques, most of them anyway. At Grady's ranch there in Falk County, he's got a barn full of antlers, skulls, just lining the area. And then early on, I had taken a lot of the antlers and put them on plaques similar to what Grandpa had done, and he's got a bunch of those in his garage. The 2-car garage in his house, an extra big garage, and those are hanging in the garage that have the plaques on them. But a lot of them don't. They're just the skulls that were just left out and weathered in the sun until they lost all the tissue on them, so they don't smell anymore. And then he just put them in the barn, kind of up in the high in the wall, tucked in there. And there's a pretty good record, pretty whole bunch of them, especially when Caitlin and Shayna started getting deer tags too, and filling up the walls with deer skulls and antlers. So another future project to put together. After I got all my other projects done, then we'll kick that one off, hopefully. Get Grady. I need to get Grady on the podcast. Maybe get him as a regular guest in the future. It might be tough though, because he's so busy doing ranch work now all the time. He retired from federal government. I don't know how many years ago that was. 5 years ago, maybe. And I think he works way harder now than he ever has, just because there's so much to do and so many things he wants to do on that ranch. So anyway, good memories. Anyway, so there you go. People that want to drop off after the chapters in the record, you can feel free. But the rest of you want to hang on. I'll talk about some stuff. Let's go some current events, let's call it. And I think I could touch on a bunch of my recurring segments in these current events. But first, let's hold up the book. There it is, Big Coulee. You're seeing double. There's the poster over here. And I'm holding up the copy of the book. And I think I'm going to read the first chapter today when I get done with this podcast. Maybe I'll read this book, the whole thing. Try to get done this next week, just to read it and get caught up on the series and market it better. So that's the first sponsor for today's podcast. Anyway, today I have a new segment I'm going to call "What the Hell is Going On Out There?" Also known as Crazy. So I get an email from the Santa Fe New Mexican, which is the local paper for Santa Fe, New Mexico. appropriately called the Santa Fe New Mexican. And I get the headlines in an email every day. And as I saw the headlines today, and they have the local stories, they have little um opinion, like two opinion things, and then sports, and then they have nationwide stories. So the nationwide stories, there was two stories that just I don't know how they got picked out, but they were so ridiculous, and that's why I called this news segment called Crazy, was because one of the stories was it was a story about the guy in Wyoming that was he ended up pleading guilty to charges of animal cruelty because 2 years ago, apparently, this is the time that goes by. It took 2 years for him to get into court. He had he was had uh, he had pled innocent or not guilty, pled not guilty, and then finally he changed his plea after 2 years to guilty. And he took a plea bargain. But anyway, he was a resident of Wyoming, and he had apparently run over a wolf with his snowmobile and injured it. And then he took this wolf, taped its mouth shut, and brought it into the bar. And they took pictures of it. And he's in the bar holding up a beer with his arm around the wolf with its mouth taped shut. It's all dying after being run over by a snowmobile. And this is the type of crazy people that we deal with, that we're living. These people are in society all around us. I'm just, what kind of person does that? I mean, I think he got like $1,000 fine, and he's going to be on probation for 18 months. No jail time, nothing, for doing that sort of thing. And I think this is another pretty good indication that we have a failing society. But wait, you say that you think I'm you think this category, that's the crazy person? That guy's like miniature crazy compared to this next story they had. These two stories, these were the nationwide stories that the Santa Fe New Mexican email had highlighted. There's a guy, his name is Ivan Miller. He was 22 years old. And let me go back. The guy in Wyoming, his name is Cody Roberts. He's 44 years old. So this guy, Ivan Miller, 22-year-old, allegedly committed triple murder yesterday in Utah. Started in Utah. He killed an old 86-year-old grandmother, stole her car, and then didn't like the car, so then he ended up killing like a 64-year-old lady and her niece. I think her niece was like 34, who were hiking on a hike. They were in a parking lot at a hiking trail, and he shot them, killed them, and took their Subaru Outback. And this is from, I think the 86-year-old was killed in Lyman, Utah, and then near Torrey, Utah is where he killed the other two women, allegedly. Then he took off with their credit cards and their Subaru Outback, and he came down to Farmington, New Mexico. So he's in my home state of New Mexico for a little while. Then he went back up to Durango, Colorado, and finally over to Pagosa Springs. And the police there's a lot of cameras out there, just say that. So they were able to track them through the camera and through I guess the ignition fob on that Subaru. It can be tracked through an app through the Subaru company. So the husband of the lady that owned that car was able to give that information to the police, and they were able to track this guy down, and he was arrested in Pagosa Springs. So this 22-year-old guy named Ivan Miller just murdered people because apparently he stated to the police that he just was trying to get home, get back home to Blakesburg, Iowa. And so within the segment, this new special segment that I've called "What the Hell is Going On Out There?" aka Crazy, I have an abusive language segment within a segment within a segment. And I wanted to quote the article. This is from the CNN article. Quote, "The suspect lived in Blakesburg, Iowa, and set out on a cross-country road trip a few weeks ago," his brother told the New York Times on the condition of anonymity, end quote. So I want to just maybe talk about I called this abusive language here because what do they call the condition of anonymity? So are they saying his brother was trying to be anonymous and you said that his brother told you this and then he told you this only because he wanted to remain anonymous? But she said his brother told the New York Times on the condition of anonymity. I don't really understand. I don't understand the idea. Well, I guess I don't. Maybe I don't believe you when you talk about anonymity. Anonymity, if that's what you're saying, was used in this case, because unless he had like so many brothers out there that you could not figure out which brother told this to the paper, the New York Times. Anyway, again, I think we're losing society where people are just so absolutely just have no value of life that this guy wanted to go home back to Blakesburg, Iowa, and didn't have a vehicle, so he decided to kill an elderly woman. Then didn't like that vehicle and wanted to get a newer vehicle or something. So he killed 2 more women. So I don't know. That's the theme today of crazy. So I wanted to continue that theme with a quote from the State of the Union from President Trump when he said, "These people are crazy," which is a classic quote, especially at the State of the Union address when he was pointing to the Democrats in the audience that would not stand up for his comments, saying that stand up if you agree that children should not be surgically transitioned and there should be laws preventing this. And the Democrats wouldn't stand up in agreement that children should not be surgically altered by having their body parts cut off. So I thought that was a pretty great quote from the president when it said, "These people are crazy." So now we have the segment within the segment. Also, I have a recurring segment called the Music Update. And coincidentally, I have a list of songs that fall into this crazy category. And I'd like to just go ahead and use that now as part of this podcast, I guess, that we can maybe have a discussion about. Maybe I can't do that because it's on a different computer. So I don't have the access to all those songs, but I do have a musical list and a musical update for the future that feature songs that include crazy. So sorry about that. That's one of the first things that's ever happened that way. But I have information that's on a different computer that I thought was on this computer. So anyway, believe me, there's a lot of crazy songs out there. So it fits into the musical category of musical update, which is a recurring segment on my podcast. But I don't have that available today. So that would have been a good one to talk about. But yeah, probably would have extended this podcast by another 15 minutes. So maybe it's a good thing we don't have those available at this time. I will save that. I'm going to put a pin in that so we can go through that next time. And I remember I created this list. I created the crazy list, but then I also have the mental health list, which includes other songs. And I know one of them is "Go Insane" by Lindsey Buckingham. That's a little tease. So we can talk about that in the origination of that list next time on the next podcast. I think I have a little shorter chapter in the future to have more time to talk about that list. It's one of my more enjoyable things that I was working on. That was sort of a peripheral job when I was actually employed by Federal Highway Administration. I had a little column in the Federal Highway News, they called it. There was a national newsletter for Federal Highway, and I would write a little column in that, recurring column in the quarterly newsletter. and it was the musical. It fits in the musical update category. So more on that in the future. But finally, we're in the politics here in the State of the Union and talking about crazy and Trump calling people crazy. And I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the politics, and especially since I consider myself a South Dakotan, um, a former South Dakota. I'm a New Mexican now because I think I've lived in New Mexico longer than I've lived in anywhere else in my life. So I'm not South Dakotan anymore, but I do have ties to South Dakota. So it came out, I think yesterday, that Kristi Noem she was the Secretary of Homeland Security, was Secretary, because Trump fired her yesterday. And Kristi Noem, as some of you may recall, she was the former governor of South Dakota. So there's my connection to South Dakota. And she was actually the governor when I was working there I worked for Federal Highway while she was governor. I know there was a couple issues. I'm not going to talk about them now, but I know that I have couple stories in my back pocket I'd like to bring out eventually, maybe in the recurring segment of politics in the future when we have more time. I'll talk about those stories. And I was never a big fan of Kristi Noem, and she was fired supposedly. The famous story, the famous quote of Donald Trump on The Apprentice when he was like, "You're fired." So that's a big thing going on. But I think she was just actually demoted. I think she's still with the administration in a different job, but not the Secretary of Homeland Security, because there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on under her watch, I guess if you want to call it that, with ICE and all the stuff in Minneapolis that went on there with two people getting killed. And again, I point out the fact that why does this stuff happen in Minneapolis? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's happening in any other big city. Two people were killed by ICE agents there because people were doing stupid things, interfering with law enforcement officers. I mean, if you're, I guess again, going back to the special segment called "What the hell is going on out there?" AKA crazy. That people are just losing their minds apparently. Um, I think that's the ICE stuff has calmed down, but I don't know. It's still a stain on Trump's administration, I guess, as far as having just Americans being killed while ICE is doing their job. It's still a lot of negativity pinned to Homeland Security. She's out. A new guy's coming in to manage the Homeland Security. I think it was Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Mullen, I think is his name. We'll see what happens. I think they've learned a lot in the last year or so they have a better idea of how to attack all the illegal immigration people that are here still. So I do have some positive feelings that they're going to be able to manage that and things are going to get better. But I mean, the mental illness part of this that's going on with this alleged murderer and then this guy in Wyoming, just publicly displaying the animal cruelty. I mean, they took photos of it, put them on, I don't know if he put them on Facebook, but there was people there that saw this. The guy is just, pleading not guilty when there's actual just photo evidence and witnesses that saw all this stuff happen. This guy brought this wounded, injured wolf into a bar with its mouth taped shut. And you can do Google search this and find this on the internet where there's this disgusting photos of this guy. I mean, it just gives human beings a bad name. And I don't know. I don't know why we have to put up with this stuff. If somebody should be in jail, it's that guy. I mean, that's like that guy's building up to becoming a serial killer. I believe I think you torture animals. That's like one of the first steps moving towards being a serial killer of humans and serial murderer. And I don't know about this guy from Blakesburg, Iowa that went on this, you know, killing spree of killing women, 3 women in Utah. 22 years old, just I don't know. I mean, what is just a picture of mental illness? And I guess I have a connection to Iowa. I lived in Ames, Iowa for 2.5 years while I was working for Federal Highway. My first job was Federal Highway, working in the Ames office. So that was where the division office for Federal Highway was located. It was in Ames, Iowa. Coincidentally, not the capital of Iowa. That's where most, I think, pretty much every Federal Highway office in the country, and there's a FHWA office in every state. They're in the capital except for Iowa and Maryland. And for whatever reason, the Ames, Iowa location was chosen because I think it was Iowa State University was there versus being in the capital, Des Moines, which is just like 40 minutes away. And the other state where the Federal Highway office is not in the capital city, it's Maryland. And the Federal Highway office is in Baltimore, and the capital of Maryland is Annapolis. So there you go. Little bit of trivia for you. So I just, I don't know really how to end my little segment here about what the hell is going on out there, aka crazy. So some of you, I throw that out there, and I guess maybe this is going to be the tie-in and the wrap up for the segment as we edge towards the end of the podcast. But the quote, "What the hell is going on out there?" That's the famous quote from Vince Lombardi, the Hall of Fame coach for the Green Bay Packers, and the Lombardi Trophy, the Super Bowl trophy named after him. There's a great quote. It's on film that you can sometimes people will put that into strange situations. They say, they'll just play that little sound bite, "What the hell's going on out there?" And he's yelling at the field, trying to figure out what his players are doing. And it's a classic. So I tied that back in because I think almost every episode we've mentioned the NFL. If I haven't, then it's a rare podcast that doesn't mention the NFL. So there's the tie into the NFL, and we have a lot of stuff going on. We're going to have, NFL had the NFL Combine, which is the measuring and testing of the potential draftees. They go to Indianapolis and run the 40 dash and 3-cone drill, and they get weighed and measured and for their height and their hand size, standing long jump, vertical jump, all this stuff. They do all this stuff. I think they take some tests too, kind of like some mental acuity tests. I can't remember what they're called. There's a test they used to give. I don't know if the players still voluntarily take them, but there's some mental testing they do to get an idea of how the capability of the athlete to be able to reason. There's some tricky questions on there. I think I've seen that. I can't remember what they call that test. I'll have to look that up and maybe talk about that next time. But anyway, the NFL is still chugging along. So there's been some people that are, the NFL teams are announcing who they're going to cut and release from their contracts and who's going to be available. So free agency starts. I can't remember when that starts. If that's the March 11th or if that's the beginning of the new NFL year, because they have their calendar year. It goes from, I think it starts March 11th and ends March 10th. So, that's because that's when free agency starts, and then their salary cap starts being adjusted for that year. The NFL never ceases. And then we chug along going up to the NFL draft, which will be at the end of April. And then pretty close after that, you start training camp, and then back to the NFL season. So here we are. We are like just 1 month. I think it's about 1 month away. 1 month out from when the Super Bowl happened, so we're already I'm I've already started talking about the NFL season for next year, which is a few months away. The actual full training camp. I think they have the OTAs, the optional training activities, optional. So anyway, I think that's it. I'm going to wrap it up there on the NFL note. And it's Friday, so it's going to be a good day. Good day to kick off the weekend. Podcast in the books now. So that's it. We'll sign off. As usual, I like to say, be assertive, be positive, be proactive. We're already into March. It's 2 months in the books for 2026. We time flies. We're 1/6 of the way through the year already. This weekend is daylight saving time. I heard on the radio it's not savings time; it's daylight saving time instead of save. It's not a plural savings, which was news to me. I don't know. I don't know why that's the thing. Anyway, we should just have one time. We should stay on this time all the time because I want it to be more light in the evenings. And now we're about to get more daylight in the evening by changing our clocks somehow. That changes everything. So hopefully in my lifetime we will see that the daylight saving time and the switch back and forth between standard time and saving time. It's so ridiculous. I remember seeing a quote routinely during the time changes that it was like, I don't know if it's a real quote, but it was from the Native American people saying that only a white man could think that cutting the end of a blanket off and sewing it to the other side is actually changing anything. I don't know if that's exact quote, but anyway, there's my protest against changing times twice a year. It's ridiculous. It's foolish. It's foolishness. So let's not kid ourselves. Let's take action and get this changed in my lifetime, please. Anyway, back to the sign off. Be assertive, be positive, be proactive. Get out there and enjoy the nice weekend. I think it's going to be nice, hopefully where you are too. But I will say this. We don't say goodbye. We just say, see you next time, and knock, and the door will be open to you. Seek and you'll find. Ask and you shall be given. That's it. Thank you for listening to the podcast, the Colonel and the Kid podcast, episode 32. It's coming to a close. Hope you enjoyed the long leg deer hunt. And like I said, see you next time.